This season of What's Her Name is sponsored by the Women's History Initiative at the Utah Historical Society. Utah women's history is so much more than you think. history.utah.gov/women. And by our patrons: Hannah Hassara, Kim Hokinson, Courtney Boyce, Bree Smith, Robin Brown, Carrie Gilbride, Skylar Collins, Cornelia Weiss, Heather Justin, Heather McKinnon, Amanda Gilmore, Valerie Jacobson, Jamie Lang, Jill Harrigan, Maria Sanchez, Michaela Frew, Monique Harris-Pixato, Sarah Mikado, and Caitlin McTaggart. Thank you so much for being our sponsors. We couldn't do it without you. Hi, Olivia.
Hi, Katie.
Today, our story begins on a bright spring day in 1909, Cranston, Rhode Island. We open on a perfect middle-class family. Katharine Gibbs and her husband William, who is a watchmaker at a fancy department store. Katharine, of course, is a homemaker. She's nailing it. They have 2 bright, strapping young sons and a lovely middle-class house. They go to their middle-class clubs and lunches. They ambitiously join the yacht club.
Oh.
It's all-American goodness. And on this spring day in 1909, William is getting his yacht ready for a fresh coat of paint for the season. He climbs to the top of the mast, and it snaps. He comes crashing down to the deck.
Oh.
He died without a will.
Oh.
And Katharine discovers that, by Rhode Island law, that means she owns exactly nothing.
What?
Their house was rented, so that's gone. But also, she doesn't have any money. She has no legal claim to the furniture.
What?
She doesn't own her dinnerware. She doesn't even have custody of her own children.
What year are we
Can you
in?
believe that? 1909.
No.
Yes! It's so insane.
What the heck, Rhode Island?
I know. They have to leave a will that explicitly leaves their children to the spouse, otherwise the kids go to the state. Can you believe that? She has literally nothing. What is this woman to do? Right?
Wow.
Where is life steering her?
Go to law school? Become a state legislator? I mean, what?
Right. Yeah, you're faced with this problem. I think most people probably would have said, well, hurry up and get married again.
Yeah.
Then you'll have a man and all the legal rights that come with this man you're attached to.
Wow.
No one could have dreamed up the plot of what she actually did. Katharine Gibbs would go on to first gain custody of her children, but then found a college for women.
Oh.
And trained them to become high-powered executive secretaries, as you do. But her school was so much more than that. It was an amazing school of character development. Like, so amazing, I'm desperate to go back in time and attend this school in the 1920s. It was one of the only means for American women to become financially independent and enter the halls of power.
Wow.
The Katharine Gibbs School trained an army of women who quietly marched out into society as a subversive, revolutionary force operating on the inside.
Wow.
Now, Katharine Gibbs herself has never trained as a secretary in her life. How did all this go down?
Wow.
It's a tale of 2 sisters, 2 dead patriarchs, 2 sons, and a school that changed America forever. I'm Katie Nelson.
And I'm Olivia Mickle.
And this is What's Her Name?
Fascinating women you've never heard of.
Here is my copy of Expect Great Things, How the Katharine Gibbs School Revolutionized the American Workplace for Women by Vanda Krefft. And lucky us, Vanda Krefft is our guest today.
I'm Vanda Krefft, author of Expect Great Things, How the Katharine Gibbs School Revolutionized the American Workplace for Women. And I'm delighted to be here. So thank you very much, Katie.
Vanda's book isn't just about Katharine Gibbs. It's about the school itself and its amazing impact. So to write it, she had to hunt down alumna across America, which was a mammoth task because the vast majority of the school's records are gone. So her book tells the story of the school and of the lives of many of its graduates, like amazing, diverse characters and their incredibly divergent careers they built with their degrees from Katharine Gibbs.
When I would mention to people what I was working on, they would say, if they recognize the name at all, which a great many people didn't, they would say, oh, wasn't that a secretarial school? Or wasn't that a finishing school for rich girls? And I would have to say, no, it was really quite a bit more than that.
Really, so much more. And it was only in reading Vanda's book that I realized that I, like so many I'm sure, had notions about secretaries in general that she helped me realize have really been colored by second wave feminism. So we'll dig into that later because it's super interesting. But now I know this was a school that was training women to infiltrate the halls of power and to do it so gracefully that nobody could object.
Yeah.
And in the 1920s, that was such a balancing act. But what Katharine Gibbs did was she found this narrow, almost razor-thin space in the halls of power, and she figured out how to get women into that space. She trained them to do it, and she backed them up every single step of the way. 50,000 women, to be exact.
What? Wow.
So, how did she go from perfect housewife to quiet feminist revolutionary? Chapter 1. This is The Tale of Two Patriarchs.
Katharine Gibbs was born in 1863 in Galena, Illinois, and Galena was sort of on the edge of the Wild West at that time. For her early years, hogs were running wild through the street, so that kind of gave me a picture of what life was like there.
The town is actually just up the Mississippi River from where you used to live in Iowa.
Oh.
Just up the Mississippi, not quite to Dubuque.
Yep. Poor girl. Oh, I mean, it's lovely. Octobers are lovely.
Her father owned what was called a packing house, but which really was a slaughterhouse. That was a euphemism. And he killed hogs, a great many of them, and made a lot of money at it. So she grew up in privilege in a 9,000 square foot house that had 24 rooms. And servants to wait on them. And that was what she could reasonably have expected her life to be like, a privileged, pampered daughter of wealth.
She goes off to this very fancy boarding school along with her sister Mary.
Her father sent her for high school to New York, to an upper-class Catholic school. And there, I think she began an early reinvention of herself because she was in with East Coast establishment, daughters of bankers, politicians, oil millionaires, real estate magnates, and she had to shed some of that Wild West veneer. So she changed the spelling of her name. It was originally Katharine with a C, and then it becomes Katharine with a K, reaching for an upper class appearance.
I like these two sisters because they're opposites. You have the sort of compliant, conformist Katharine, whose motto is, do the best you can and do it with good grace. And I love that. That's going to steer you well, yes. And then you have Mary, whose motto is, take sides and get mad at things.
Yeah!
These two sisters are going to be bonded for life. I love it. They have a much younger sister about whom details are very scarce. She's apparently mentally disabled, and she spends the vast majority of her life in an institution. So we don't really know much about her. So, but all of these sisters, though they are vastly different as individuals, have no interest in getting married.
And so after high school, she goes back to Galena, and she lives a life of a social butterfly because she's taken care of. And she was apparently rather charming and nice looking. She flits around visiting relatives, enters ladies' card game tournaments, and holds parties on the lawn with croquet, dabbles a bit in amateur theater.
So she's like 29 and still hasn't gotten married and no plans to. I feel like she's like Louisa May Alcott. She's going to paddle her own canoe. She has money. She has independence. She's like, I don't need another man.
Yeah.
What happens next is in 1892, her father, who's been very indulgent, is perfectly willing to pay for all this. Her father got on a streetcar in Dubuque, Iowa, put his money in the coin box, sat down, and died of heart failure. Nobody expected that, and he was one of these burly patriarchs who I suspect thought he was going to live forever. That meant he didn't make a will, and that was a big problem because Katharine had 5 brothers, and they inherited the estate, the wealth, and they were not eager to share it.
The brothers inherit everything. The girls get nothing.
They immediately put the slaughterhouse on the market and decided to sell the family mansion. That creates a crisis for Katharine and her sister Mary. And Katharine has to find something to do, so what does she do? She finds a husband. And fortunately, she finds a good husband. She finds William Gibbs, and he seems to be a nice, easygoing, middle-class man. They run off to New York and get married, and then they move to Providence, Rhode Island, where he has a job as a watchmaker at the Tilden Thurber department store, which is an upper-class department store. So he has a nice, comfortable job, and they live in a suburb called Cranston. And she settles into being a middle-class housewife. And it's a very different environment from what she knew back in the Midwest.
Mary, who I'm sure was busy taking sides and getting mad at things in this whole situation, she never married. She lived with Katharine as Katharine raised her family.
From what I was able to find, her life in Cranston was as a quiet housewife, a quiet, submissive housewife who went along with what her husband wanted to do. So her husband was a sailing enthusiast, so they joined the yacht club and he participates in the races. And I assume that she was standing on the shore cheering him on. And they had 2 sons.
2 sons, strapping young lads. And as they grew up, they were polar opposites, just like the sisters. One was this sort of like lively, gregarious go-getter who's careless. And then you have the other who's this sort of serious, depressive, anxious type. These are the 2 sons.
And she stays home and takes care of them. And by all reports of the neighbors, she was a, quote, delightful member of the community. Didn't make waves, didn't talk about politics, just settled in. They had a very middle-class life. And then another catastrophe. Our girl does not have an easy life. In 1909, husband William Gibbs is preparing his boat for repainting, and he's climbing up on the mast of the boat, and it breaks and sends him flying down onto the deck. He didn't die immediately, but he's sent to the hospital, and there he dies. And guess what? Did he have a will? Did he learn from her father's experience? No, he didn't. So once again, Katharine is left high and dry. And unfortunately, the law did not protect her because their sons were under 14. And under Rhode Island law at that point, unless the parent made arrangements granting custody to the other parent in case of their own death, then the state could intervene and take the children. And she didn't actually own any of her personal possessions. Now, fortunately, she had a brother who was a lawyer. And so he seems to have guided her through that. After a few years, she did get custody of the children, and she got a rather conservative allowance from the court for expenses. But there wasn't a whole lot of money there to begin with. And so she realized very quickly she was going to have to, again, make another big change in her life. She has no work experience outside the home, and she's in her mid-40s.
So, chapter 2 of her life is A Tale of Two Sisters.
Well, her sister Mary had been living with the family for a couple of years, and Mary was unmarried, and these two gals get together and decide, what do they know? Well, one thing they learned from the high school education in New York was sewing skills. So they decide to start a dressmaking business, and they don't know what they're doing.
A dress shop. We don't know how to run a business or anything. We'll learn as we go. Let's do it.
That goes under pretty quickly.
The learning curve is a little bit too steep. Surely in this position, plenty of people were encouraging one or both of them to marry, of course. But this is not the path they choose. And this is where things get really interesting, because the braver they get, the more their lives expand.
At that point, she decides she's going to be financially independent. The problem is, she has only a high school education. Then Mary decides, well, somebody's got to earn some income, and she takes herself off as a student to a small secretarial school that's in Providence, in kind of a sketchy neighborhood. And she does so well there that the school asks her to stay on as a teacher.
You can't go far in a motor car all by yourself in the moonlight.
And then in 1911, when that secretarial school comes up for sale, Katharine decides she's going to buy it. It's a ridiculous thing to do.
Nobody helping you.
The only business she tried to start, the dressmaking business, failed. But she forges ahead, and she buys the school, and it has one student, 2 rooms, some old furniture, and a dusty stack of textbooks, and that's what she starts with.
I love this. The self-belief.
The ability to see possibilities.
Exactly. So Mary was the teacher, having just graduated herself from school.
Of course.
And Katharine, of course, has some catching up to do. She should be at least proficient in the skills she's purporting to teach.
She takes herself off to Simmons College in Boston to learn a bit about typing and stenography and how to teach people things, because she's never done any of this. And that helps. And then the real turning point is the U.S. entry into World War I in April 1917, because at that point, most executive secretaries were male. Now, when those young men are getting drafted and sent off to foxholes in France, who's going to fill those jobs? Katharine Gibbs's vision was brilliantly simple. She decides she's going to train women to take over those jobs, and the women are going to be much better than the men ever were, so that they will hold the jobs when the men come back, and they will change the perception of a female executive secretary. And that's exactly what she does.
She goes one more than just, I'm going to put women in this position. She says, I know women are going to be better at this, and we are going to prove it so that women keep these jobs, which is really forward thinking, I think, especially when you think about what a secretary meant back then.
Yeah, it's a very male position.
Yeah. Like, I'm always thinking about, like, the 1700s when you say, this is my personal secretary.
Yeah.
This is a highly competent man. You know, like John Quincy Adams, he spent his life as a secretary.
Yeah. Trusted with all your most secret information, and they're in on all the most important meetings, and they're making decisions independently. They're like your vice president of your stuff, right?
Of all things, yeah.
Deciding things so you don't have to be bothered.
It wasn't really till making this episode that I really stopped to think about. When I hear the word secretary, I never think man.
Yeah.
Never. Whereas before 1917, it was always man.
Yeah. Women would be wildly inappropriate in such a powerful position.
Very.
Yes, it's a big gamble, and she just powers on through. But what people around her said was that one of the main qualities that she had that really impressed them was she had fearlessness. She had a lot of courage going in, and she believed so much in her vision that she would just plow ahead against what other people might see as obstacles. She has such confidence in her vision that she immediately goes out and she opens a school in Boston in the Back Bay in 1917. And the following year, 1918, she opens in New York on Park Avenue because she wants to communicate this is a classy business. And how do you communicate that? First of all, by the location of the school. She takes the money that has been coming into the business. She does not take loans. That's how she finances this expansion.
She is just completely building this from scratch and taking huge risks, just betting on herself.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Wow.
Go big or go home. And one of my favorite aspects of learning about the Katharine Gibbs School was learning all the various mottos that Katharine embraced and taught at her school. So far, we've certainly seen her testing the strength of her motto, do the best you can, and do it with good grace. But in this chapter of her life, she's learning the power of a new motto, which she'll go on to teach. Believe you can, and half the battle is over.
The decor was that of, say, an upper-class drawing room, at least the lobbies. And so you would walk into the Back Bay School or the Park Avenue School, and everything would be done in very good taste. They bought the nicest furniture they could find, elegance, fresh flowers around, which immediately communicates to the students, this is where you belong in life.
In the 1920s, American society was divided by all hegemonies: race, ethnicity, religion, class, and gender. All of those, like, strict divisions. She did not, and I'm sure could not, cast aside all the hegemonies. As I said, we don't have school records, so nobody can say for sure who was and wasn't admitted to the school. Vanda Krefft only had, like, surviving yearbooks from some years. Black women do appear in some surviving yearbooks. Just by what folks say, it seems like Jewish students were unwelcome to apply maybe in the earlier years. Like, we can't say, but I think we can assume she's not magically unprejudiced, for the 1920s. Yeah. She, like all of us, is a product of her time.
And presumably you have to have the right accent to enter those spaces you're going into. You have to have the right...
That is where she is revolutionary.
Oh.
And that is where I am quite surprised. Because for the 1920s, what she did is remarkable. She did absolutely cast aside the class hegemony. Anybody can go there.
Wow.
Hill folk from Tennessee. I mean, like the lowest class frontier girls. Wow. Any girl with ambition can enroll at the Katharine Gibbs School.
Wow.
And she will teach you all the tricks so that you can not only get a job, but also shift you into that upper echelon of society. In that way, I think she's totally revolutionary.
And that's why people think it's finishing school. Because it is doing that too. She's
turning them into... Yeah, so they think it's finishing school for rich girls.
Wow.
And what she's actually doing is the opposite of that.
Many of them did not come from the upper class. Largely they were, I would say, there were a lot of lower middle class women, some lower class. There were also very wealthy young women as well. So for those women who wanted to participate in the wider world, that's what Katharine Gibbs does. Now, generally, that was a 2-year program. Part of it was the very rigorous training in technical office skills, that being typing, stenography, filing, and that apparently was brutal. But the other component of the education was that they got the equivalent of a high-class college education, because Katharine Gibbs's emphasis on you deserve the best and only the best, and do not accept second best. She goes to Columbia University and she convinces a number of professors to come and teach classes at her school. She also recruits accomplished people from industry. She goes to Wellesley, Harvard, MIT. This is the level of instruction that you get. So for those young women whose families didn't want to pay for 4 years of college or couldn't pay for 4 years of college, Katharine Gibbs was a bargain education.
Yes, you have to be 100% perfect at all of the clerical skills, like 100%. All the students say, I've never studied so hard in my life. I've never worked so hard in my life. But also, there are classes in deportment and how, all of the rituals of dining. There are classes in all kinds of things, like what's going to make you a well-rounded character. You need to know the basics of art history. You need to know all the great composers, all of the things.
This was extremely rigorous. They would have 400 pages of reading a night of English literature. They had psychology classes. They had history, world government, economics, taught at a high level. Everything in the environment was carefully chosen to communicate the motto, expect great things, because so much of what society at that point was telling women, young women, don't expect great things. Narrow your horizons. You belong within the 4 walls of home.
This season of What's Her Name is sponsored by the Women's History Initiative at the Utah Historical Society. Think you know Utah history? Think again.
The Women's History Initiative highlights Utah's dynamic history makers. 8 sovereign nations in Utah since time immemorial.
Pioneers, explorers, immigrants, entrepreneurs, visionaries, and dreamers who have made a home there ever since.
Did you know Utah women were the first in the U.S. to vote under an equal suffrage law? All the way back in 1870?
Visit history.utah.gov/women to learn more. Expect great things. The overarching motto of this school. I love that.
This is why the girls, not... I'd assumed that was for the employers. Expect great things of our girls, but it's for the girls. Expect great things of your life.
It's double. Yeah, it's a dual motto, because her school had such a reputation that employers, if they hear that this applicant is a Gibbs girl, it's like, send her over. We will hire her immediately. Like, they had such a reputation that you could instantly get a job. So, yes, everybody can expect great things. But it's also, for her, it's her message to them in life. Yeah. It's much more like on the personal development level. And this is why I am desperate for a time machine. I want to go back in time and attend this school in Back Bay. I want to go to a feminist character development school in the 1920s and see the kinds of things that I learn, the kinds of things that are deemed to be incredibly important.
Most important in the dress code were the hat and the white gloves out in public. And you could get a demerit if you were seen by a professor without your hat or your white gloves out in public. The dress code was conservative but fashionable. And they would have classes in fashion and grooming as well. Now that may sound to contemporary ears as overly conformist. But there was a uniform for success. Really, before that phrase, dress for success, entered the conversation, she really put that into practice. And it's, I think, a practical accommodation to reality. Suits, shoulder-length hair, no longer than that, conservative jewelry, no bright red lipstick or nail polish, patent leather handbag because you can wipe off any dirt or smears. And they would have what they called the Gibbs budgeteers, who would go around to stores like Macy's and select mid-range or lower price clothing that would look like things that you would buy at Saks or Bonwitz or the upscale department stores. Because Katharine Gibbs' philosophy was, while you had to look fashionable, you didn't want to be spending your salary there. You wanted to spend your money on self-improvement. That is, on going to concerts, going to the opera, going to plays, even going to movies. I mean, she was not a snob culturally. She believed have a wide range of cultural experiences. And also really important was travel, go to Europe. And at one point she said, if you have to sacrifice, if you have to go and live at the YWCA so you can afford to do these things, do that.
Wow.
Isn't that awesome?
That's wonderful.
She's pushing back against that materialist impulse that you are what you own or you are what you wear. No, you are the way that you think, the way that you speak, and you're what today is called cultural capital. And then at the end of the training, they had to take a very rigorous final exam. The components of that were typing and stenography, and you had to meet these breakneck speeds, and students would fail a number of times, but you could keep trying and keep trying.
Another part of the school I admire so much, because I don't see it in any universities today, is that the college guarantees employment for you. Good employment. And they'll as soon as you graduate, they will send you off to jobs. And they'll say, like, what kinds of things do you love? What makes you feel fulfilled? And they'll send you off to a job with this message. If you aren't thriving, if you're not being challenged, if you're not enjoying that work, quit.
Wow.
There will always be another job for you.
There was one woman who, her first job was at a manufacturing company. And the men were like cavemen in their attitudes towards working women. And they made a lot of rather vulgar comments about women. And she just decided, I'm not going to take this. And she went back to the placement desk at Katharine Gibbs, and they immediately handed her an opportunity for a position at Gourmet magazine, which at that point had offices in the penthouse of the Plaza Hotel. And it was a delightful job, and she had a lot of fun there. But that's the kind of thing, they wouldn't punish you for coming back and saying, this isn't for me. It would be, okay, they shouldn't have treated you that way. Here's something we think you will enjoy.
Wow.
That's the Katharine Gibbs difference. Like, imagine if you knew you could always find another job.
Yeah.
Powerful.
Yeah. Especially for women in a very male-dominated space, right? Like, you must treat me a certain way or I'm out.
Yes.
Wow.
And they stood by that for decades.
Another thing that I think is maybe important to mention is that as much as the emphasis was on equipping young women so that they could always be financially independent in a challenging and interesting field that suited to them, Katharine Gibbs was not at all against marriage and family. She believed that if you wanted that, that was a very enriching part of your life. So if you took time off to go and be with your family, and then you decided you wanted to re-enter the workforce, or if you had to re-enter the workforce, if your husband died suddenly without a will, and all of a sudden you needed to earn a living, you could always come back for a free refresher course. You could polish your skills up.
Free refresher courses for life.
Wow.
What a gorgeous idea. All of this when, at the same time, in the same city, a Harvard medical school professor was insisting that higher education damaged a woman's ability to have children because higher education causes your uterus to atrophy.
Mm-hmm. Society was absolutely insistent that women's dainty fingers would be unable to operate a typewriter keys or to take shorthand, to write for so long. Mm-hmm. These women's dainty
fingers have the stamina. Yeah.
That have been playing the piano and doing needlework for centuries.
Expect great things. I love it. If you really internalize that, if that shapes your mindset, it filters what you notice, it changes what you believe in and what you go for, you know? It's an affirmation. Great things happen to me. I am worthy of great things. Expecting great things can lead to a magical life. It also can't shield you from the plot twists and heartbreaks of human existence. Chapter 3 of her life is a tale of two sons.
Her older son, killed himself. And that, one can imagine was devastating.
36 years old, Howard Gibbs jumped from the window of their 9th floor apartment on Park Avenue. Katharine, she had a large apartment there where she still lived with Mary and her 2 adult sons. Neither of them had married. And Howard jumped early one morning with a handwritten note in his pocket that said, "To my family, please forgive me. Either this or the madhouse. Consult those who know." And this was her depressive son. To add to his struggles, he had served as an ambulance driver in World War I. Which we can begin to imagine thanks to our episode on Maud Fitch. Traumatic, to say the least.
Yeah.
Katharine Gibbs was 71 years old at this point. And the reference to the madhouse had deep significance for their family, I think, because she and Mary had that younger sister who had spent most of her life in such an institution.
I think it must have been just absolutely crushing for her.
So here's another one of Katharine's bits of advice from her school. Carry your heart high in the face of difficult things.
Wow.
And I like this image of carrying your own heart, cradling it high as you move through.
Wade through the murky water of life.
Wade through, perfect word, yeah. And she also phrased it this way, which has come to my mind many times since I read the book. Give to courage a smiling face, and to strength, gaiety of spirit. And you have equipped yourself to meet life on any terms it offers.
When you give to courage a smiling face, and to strength, gaiety of spirit, you have equipped yourself to meet life on any terms it offers. And she was very much tested on that. This wasn't something that she could say from a life of ease, because even once the school got started and became very successful, she still had tragedy in her life. But what people said was she came to the school, she had a job to do, and that job required her to be professional and efficient and considerate of others, and that's what she was. Not to minimize whatever you're going through, because here she says the office details aren't half so important as what your own personal problem is. So she's not minimizing it. She's just saying that you have a purpose in the workplace and you need to fulfill those responsibilities independent of whatever is going on emotionally in your personal life. And I think that's actually really good advice, and I think that could be very applicable today. Katharine Gibbs herself died in 1934. She'd had health problems for a number of years. Again, she didn't talk about them. She didn't really display them.
She caught pneumonia, had a long hospitalization, but didn't pull through. Students, staff, and alumna from her school, they filled St. Patrick's Cathedral on Fifth Avenue for her funeral. The Boston School's registrar, Elizabeth Whitmore, said, "No head of a business or school or organization ever won or deserved higher respect than Mrs. Gibbs, and for none could it ever have been a greater privilege to work." Without its charismatic leader, it seemed like the school might die. But
Gordon, the younger son, steps up and takes over, and he's really has the opposite temperament of his brother. He's a bon vivant, and he loves to fly airplanes, and he loves to go sailing, and he's just one of these cheerful life of the party guys, and he very much kept in practice his mother's philosophy. So he really carried on her plan brilliantly, I think, adapting it to the changing business and social environment, but the same philosophy and the same emphasis on excellence and exclusivity.
And Mary, her sister, still taking sides and getting mad at things, she carried on as an advisor to Gordon as he ran the school, and she lived into the 1950s.
Wow.
There was the original school in Providence near Brown University, and then you have New York on Park Avenue, and then Boston, which was always in the Back Bay. Then during World War II, they opened a location in Chicago. Then there was a location in Montclair, New Jersey. So 5 locations.
It's impossible to summarize the impact of the school. 50,000 women's lives were changed, and all the lives that those women reached, like ripples in a pond, the way that this radiated out. And this is where Vanda Krefft's book is so fun, because you get to glimpse the stories of some of these women. She personally interviewed many of them. So let's just get a taste.
So between the start of the school and when the family sold the school in 1968, some 50,000 young women graduated from the school. And they fan out in all fields, and they really make a difference. We have Joy Hummel, who for a number of years in the 40s wrote Wonder Woman comic books.
What? Amazing. Yay! And she made Wonder Woman smart, complex, a real hero.
She had a wonderful imagination. She came up with the zaniest stories,
creating a new idea of what's possible to countless young people across America.
Wow.
An influential author was Mary Slattery Stoltz, one of the first authors to write serious young adult fiction. And her first book was called To Tell Your Love. And I read the book, and it's really, really good. It's really well written. And she wrote, I think, some 60 books throughout her career. She was very successful. Then we have Claire Brauman, who became president of Viking Books. She started as a secretary and worked her way up. And one of the things I remember her telling me was that she went into one of her bosses, who was the president of one of the paperback imprints that she worked for, and she said, "Look, you can either promote me or you can lose me to another company." And the boldness of that really struck me. Imagine saying that to your boss and not getting fired. But she was so good at what she did. And the other thing was, and this is what I heard from other people as well, was that they were completely confident that if this job didn't work out, there was another one. They could get another one with a snap of their fingers. And that was true. So that emboldens them to make statements like that. And indeed, she consistently rose up through the ranks. She found her niche. She found what she was good at. And that's what propelled her up the ladder. Results. Then we have a woman who was a pilot with the Army Air Forces during World War II. She loved flying, and she had her pilot's license, and she immediately applied to be part of the WASPs, they were called. And she flew these test missions, and she just had a great time. It was not by any means a safe occupation, because one of her jobs was to fly with a fabric target flying behind the plane, which ground troops would shoot at. So, yeah, that was kind of the adventure of her life.
Mary Goodrich started out as a pilot, but in her early 20s, she lost her depth perception in her vision and lost her pilot's license. She was despairing. So she went to the Katharine Gibbs School, found a new way forward, and set out into the business world. There was this new startup in California that had just released the world's first animated feature film called The Walt Disney Company. And she was hired as the secretary in the story department, which she loved. She worked on Fantasia, Pinocchio, Bambi, and Dumbo. And on Dumbo, she was the advisor to the animators on how an elephant could achieve flight. Like, what would his ears look like when he's
of course
flying?
She was. Oh,
isn't that amazing?
That's wonderful. I could see that conversation. We're just not, hey, I bet we have someone here.
Yeah, because I never really thought about it, but when Dumbo is flying, it really looks real, If they had just had his ears straight out, or, there could have been so many ways where it's like, this is not realistic, but it looks realistic.
I love thinking, she's like, Walt, look, you've got me in the room. Please let me help you.
Then we have Catherine Toll, who became the head of the Women's Marines, and other graduates who worked for Ted Kennedy, for Howard Hughes, the Duke and Duchess of Windsor. Oh, and probably the most famous graduate is Loretta Swit, who, of course, starred on the Emmy-winning TV series MASH. I was fortunate enough to be able to interview her. And what Katharine Gibbs did for Loretta Swit was it gave her top-level skills so that she could get interesting temporary secretarial assignments while she was pursuing her acting ambitions, and she loved it.
Who can brighten darkened skies? Who can dry my tear-dimmed eyes? Nobody but you.
Joan Clark began as a secretary in the Army in Berlin right after World War II, and she was one of those people who step by step rose up through the ranks. And then in the 70s, she got appointed as an ambassador to Malta. And then she continues to rise up, and she becomes head of the Foreign Service. One other graduate I think to mention was Marjorie Bell Chambers, who worked for the UN initially. She went on to become an advisor to 4 U.S. presidents on women's issues in the 70s and 80s.
Speaking of the 70s and 80s, America has changed by then. And with second wave feminism, you have a lot of righteous anger about sexism in the workplace and in the home, sexism everywhere. And the iconic Gibbs girl, all put together with her pristine white gloves and her hat, she becomes emblematic of what needs tearing down. The Gibbs family didn't own or run the school by this point.
All of a sudden, Katharine Gibbs signifies something very different than it traditionally has. It was always about women's empowerment, about expanding opportunities for women, and now it becomes a symbol of oppression or repression or a regressive view of women. And you have the second wave feminists who are, angry with a lot of legitimate reasons. and they march up to the Katharine Gibbs School in New York, and they start haranguing the president. You're training women to be submissive and to accept a lesser role. And the president at that point tries to explain, but you don't understand history. You don't understand what the circumstances were that formed this school and what it meant in its own time, in the context of its time, and they don't want to hear it. Understandably, to some extent, but I think it's a big mistake not to look at history and not to look at the context of the time, and also not to appreciate, to some extent, that what Katharine Gibbs graduates accomplished set the stage for these women to make those demands. Because women have proved themselves in the workplace. They have changed attitudes among male colleagues who thought women were scatterbrained and incompetent. And when they work with somebody who really knows what they're doing and who helps them do their own jobs better, their attitudes change. And that, I believe, is really an important component of making progress. It's not enough to demand and it's not enough to be right, but you have to be able to demonstrate, to show this is not just a theoretical argument. We have proof. We have experiential proof.
And second wave feminists, they were calling them office wives.
Yeah.
So I'm so fascinated by this moment and these protests because when you can see both sides,
Yeah.
it really expands your understanding of the human story. You know, I definitely see why they're angry and protesting. And I also see how the Gibbs movement laid the groundwork for that next step.
I admire so much what she accomplished and how she didn't feel sorry for herself or she didn't feel victimized. She always looked ahead.
I love her nuggets of advice. I love her quotable mottos.
Yeah.
These are concrete things that can anchor us in tough times. Another one that I love, that I certainly embrace in my own life, and that you mentioned at the beginning, is focus on the possibilities rather than the difficulties. Emily Dickinson said it too. I've got that on my wall. Dwell in possibilities.
Yeah.
I think she lived that, and she taught so many women the power of doing that. You focus on what is possible instead of only fixating on what's wrong. Then you can really open doors you didn't even know were there.
You'll vanish with the night, madame. In dreams I kiss your hand, madame, and pray my dreams come true.
Really, one of the most remarkable qualities that she had was that willingness to embrace change, even though it was very unwelcome. The death of the father and all of the disruption that meant to her life. And then in her mid-40s, the husband dies, and there goes another way of life that is shattered, leaving her with nothing. But she doesn't seem ever to have had a period where she feels sorry for herself or she feels victimized. No, what does she do? She says, what else can I do? What are my possibilities? And I think that was really a part of her genius. When I get discouraged, I go back to what she says, and I think if she could do it, being as unqualified as she was, and if she could achieve such success, it really opens up a sense of possibility and a sense of hope and a sense of persevere and give to courage a smiling face. And that, I think, she really illustrated when she is left with nothing. And what does she do? Instead of collapsing and instead of thinking everything always goes wrong for me, I don't have anything to offer, I don't have any skills, I don't have any experience. No, I think what she did was she saw that these disadvantages could be turned to advantage. She didn't have the limitations of this is the way it has to be. She could look at this is the way it could be.
Special thanks to Vanda Krefft, whose new book is called Expect Great Things: How the Katharine Gibbs School Revolutionized the American Workplace for Women. Vanda has shared photos from the book with us. You can find links to the book and the photos at What'sHerNamePodcast.com. Music for this episode was recorded in the 1920s by Irving, Aaronson and his commanders, Nat, Shikret and the Victor Orchestra, Johnny Marvin, Arden and Ohman, the Paul Whiteman Orchestra, Fred Rich and his orchestra, Leo Reisman and his orchestra, with additional music by Amulets and JVNA. Our theme song was recorded by Daniel Foster Smith. And if you're a lover of short stories or Maeve Binchy, I have a recommendation for you. Check out Maeve Binchy's short story called King's Cross, which you can find in her book London Transports. I can't prove it, but I swear she was thinking of the Katharine Gibbs School when she wrote the main character for that delightful story. And check out the tours section of our website to find out where we are traveling next. Thank you so much for donating. Thanks for listening.